Hola and welcome or bienvenidos to foreignlanguagehouse.com's first week Spanish class. All right, you ready to go? It's August and you've got to get that first week of Spanish class down. Now, I've always found, and by the way, I'm Catherine Fortin of foreignlanguagehouse.com, that beginnings are always the hardest to plan and get materials going for. And then once you get after those first couple of weeks, the class kind of goes in a flow as you get into the content and vocabulary and just kind of the nature of what you're doing for your Spanish class. Now, I'm going to help you set up any level of Spanish class with some very general principles. We are going to learn how to start and finish in Spanish and try to use Spanish for 90% of the class time. At times it can seem impossible, but you can really do it with some tips and techniques. We are going to set up class routines and systems in Spanish, getting to know you activities for the beginning of the year in Spanish, which are wonderful and very necessary for you and your students. Name games, fantastic review of sounds, phonemes, alphabet, letters, all sorts of great things. Bridges to review and content. This is how you get into the real meat of the beginning of the year of your Spanish class, and even more. Let's talk about starting and finishing in Spanish. Diane and I do believe that 90% of each class should be taught in the target language. That being said, you can't just go full throttle, native pace, way above the students' heads into your target language. You use some tried and true techniques. And we definitely recommend that you start with a few minutes in English and then use an overt sign or signal. It can be a flag of a country. In Spanish classes, we've used pictures of pyramids or calaveras. All sorts of cultural items can be your visual cue. And once you flash that visual cue, the students know that is only target language time. In Spanish, I use a chant that I've pretty much used with all grade levels. Uno, dos, tres, español. Uno, dos, tres, adiós inglés. And the older kids tend to make it a little bit more of a rap. But students need to know when it's time to be in that target language only and not fall back or do code switching into English or the home language. If you are going to teach using immersion techniques, you need to have lots of visuals. Any type of simple visual will really help, whether it's a poster, a magazine picture, your own drawing, or a basic toy store prop of a plastic car or a doll. Anything visual you can bring in. Teaching with immersion techniques does include having to use lots of visuals pretty much all the time, and it can take you some time to round those up. Make sure that the language you use during instruction and content for what the students are really supposed to acquire during that class or over a few is in caregiver or motherese. Again, native pace, target language works best with advanced level students, and most of us really don't even have advanced level students even at the high school level. If you look at the ACT proficiency guidelines, use motherese, repetition, 3-4 word sentences. It really might make you tired and maybe give you a headache, but your students really need this, especially if they are beginners. As you come down from the class, I always do the chant, hola, 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 inglés, and students are often very happy. I only allow for 3 to 5 minutes of English at the end of class. This is when we do a recap. I'll have a student summarize what we did in class in English, go over homework, because it's vital the students understand this in their home language, or L1, their first language as we call it. They've had enough immersion, they've had tons of Spanish for that 90%, and you need to bring them down. This also gives students an opportunity to ask you questions. We often hear, I've heard certainly from parents and students, that there's no opportunity to ask questions in English. And make sure you get just a few minutes for those students who really want to know details, or who are really motivated, or maybe a little nervous by the whole immersion process. Well, there you go. Start and finish in Spanish. And if you'd like some more activities or materials on this, see foreignlanguagehouse.com. Gracias y adiós.